There is a specific RSP number at 65 that can either keep your taxes low for the rest of your life or quietly push you into a higher tax bracket every single year in retirement. Now, most Canadians have never heard this number. They don't know where they stand, and they don't understand how this connects to their RSP meltdown strategy that could save them thousands. And we're going to fix that today. And if you want to check your own risk level while you watch, I've built a simple free RSP risk tool in the link below. One of the most confusing things for Canadians approaching retirement is understanding how big their RSP should be by 65. And for most people, they generally guess wrong because they assume that the goal is to grow it as large as possible. And that mindset makes perfect sense when you're working, when you're saving, when you're investing, when you're contributing to be able to grow that portfolio. But once retirement income starts stacking on top of CPP, OAS, pensions, investment income, and eventually RIF withdrawals, your RRSP becomes less about growth and more about tax management. And tax management is where most retirees get blindsided, not because they made a mistake in savings, but because they were never shown how their RSP interacts with everything else. This video exists for one reason, and it's to give you the number that you need to know at 65, explain why it matters, and show you exactly how the RSP meltdown strategy fits into solving it. If you're between 54 and 65, this is one of the most important pieces of financial clarity that you're going to get this year. Now, before we talk about the numbers, let's talk about the system that you're retiring into. Because at 65, two major income sources come into the picture: CPP and OAS. Now, the average CPP payment is around $848 per month. The maximum OAS is around $814 per month. Now, that's already just over $19,000 per year. Then add even just a modest pension, let's say $25,000 per year. That's going to put you around $44,000 of income, and you still haven't even touched your RSP, you're not working part-time, and you haven't generated any dividends or capital gains. Now, here's the key point. The next federal bracket increase hits just north of $57,000 this year. And once you cross that line, you pay roughly 6% more on the federal tax side on every additional dollar. Now, provincial taxes vary, but the increase also applies on top of that. And suddenly, that retirement income now becomes less efficient, not more. Nothing about this scenario is extreme. This is the average Canadian retirement structure. And it's why the size of your RSP at retirement matters so much more than people realize. So here it is. The RRSP number to watch for at age 65 is $178,000. If your RSP is below that number, the required RIF withdrawals later in your 70s will generally keep you under the next federal bracket when CPP, OAS, and a modest pension are all added in. Now that means you're going to have lower lifetime tax, lower bracket creep, and just overall more flexibility. But if your RSP is above that number at 65, you're already on a path where the math starts working against you. Your forced RIF withdrawals will be larger. They're going to stack on top of your CPP and your OAS and any other income you might be getting. And this is what pushes you into those higher tax brackets, often without even realizing it. And this is why the RSP meltdown is just so critical, because it fixes this exact problem before it becomes unfixable. Now, many Canadians listening to this will think, Adam, I have $300,000, $400,000, maybe $500,000. Isn't that good? Yes, it is good. You did the right thing by saving, but the system doesn't reward you for saving. The system taxes you on the income. And your RRSP, well, that becomes income, whether you want it or not. RIF withdrawals are mandatory at 72, and the minimum at that age is 5.4% of the account value. So if your RRSP has grown to $500,000, your minimum RIF withdrawal is going to be around $27,000 every single year. And that's going to increase over time, whether you need it or not. Add CPP, add OAS, and then add a small pension, maybe some dividends, capital gains, rental income, or maybe even some part-time work. And then you're well over the bracket threshold before you do anything extra. That's why the number matters, because it predicts your tax future more accurately than almost anything else. Let's take a look at a very typical retiree couple. They're receiving the average CPP, they're receiving full OAS, they each have a $25,000 per year pension, and they both have in their RSPs around $250,000 at the age of 65. Nothing unusual. In fact, this is incredibly common. Now, fast forward 7 years with 5.5% investment growth. Each of their RSPs is going to grow to around $333,000. Now at 72, the minimum RIF withdrawal on that amount is about $18,000. Stack that on top of CPP plus OAS plus their pension, and their income rises into the next federal bracket. Not because they chose to take extra, not because they were irresponsible, not because they live large, simply because their RSP was too large relative to their other fixed income sources. That is exactly what the RRSP Meltdown prevents. Now, the RRSP Meltdown strategy is not about draining your RRSP. It's not about cashing out everything. And it's not about paying more tax today to avoid tax later. It's about shifting your RRSP withdrawals into the years where your tax rate is lowest. And usually that's between the ages of 58 and 69, so that your future RIF withdrawals don't explode your tax bracket later on. Now, a meltdown done correctly basically looks like this. It lowers your lifetime tax. It protects your OAS. It keeps you below bracket thresholds. It smooths out your income. It increases your flexibility and gives you more money in your healthiest retirement years. The meltdown is not a trick. It's not a loophole. It's a mathematical damage control tool. Now, everything in this video leads to one conclusion. Your RRSP size at 65 determines whether your meltdown is optional or absolutely essential. If you want to check your own situation, your tax risk, your bracket exposure, and whether your RRSP is heading into the danger zone, you can use the RRSP risk tool that I built below. It takes less than 2 minutes to go through and shows you whether your RRSP is above or below this benchmark and helps you understand whether an RRSP meltdown is the right next step. So if you're above 178,000 at 65 years old, your next step is to not panic. It's about planning because you can still take control, but you can't wait until 70 or 71 to do it. You need structure, you need timing, and you need a clear income sequence. Here are the steps that you can take. First, we're going to map out your income between now and age 71. Number 2, we're going to identify your lowest tax years. Number 3, we're going to draw controlled amounts from your RRSP in those years. Number 4, we're going to keep your RRSP at a stable size. Number 5, we're going to reduce future mandatory RIF withdrawals. Number 6, we're going to avoid bracket creep in your 70s. This is exactly where the meltdown strategy becomes incredibly effective. Now, if you're below $178,000 at 65, you have options. You can delay your withdrawals, you can start small, you can mix your income sources. But even then, the RRSP meltdown can still be useful because the goal is not just avoiding the next tax bracket. The goal is creating the most tax-efficient path across your entire retirement, early, middle, and late life. Even a small adjustment can save you thousands long term. So if you want a single, easy to understand test of whether you're heading towards a tax problem, ask yourself this. If my RRSP doubled between now and age 70, would my required RIF withdrawals push me into a higher tax bracket? And if the answer is yes, you need a meltdown plan. If the answer is I'm not sure, well, the RRSP risk tool will tell you in 2 minutes. And if you already know that you need help building a proper plan, one that protects your taxes, keeps your OAS, and helps you structure your income for the rest of your life, you can join my January waitlist for my Tax Smart Retirement Income Blueprint. Now, December, unfortunately, is fully booked, but in January, I'm going to open up a few spots, so feel free to join my waitlist below, and you'll be the first to know when these spots open up. And if you haven't watched my last video here, watch this next, because it ties everything together and shows you exactly why the meltdown strategy is the heart of real retirement planning. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.